Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's RC Maxfield here for the Back to 12 podcast. And in today's video, we will discuss the Athletics article that breaks down the Big 12 into tiers for the football season just a couple of weeks away. But before we do that, I have a proposition for you guys. A lot of people have asked for it. I need to hear some feedback, though. If we get 25 plus new subscribers on this video, we will have a Big 12 live show once a week here on the channel, answering the latest questions that you guys have, addressing the breaking news, whatever it may be, looking at you, Iowa State, with the gambling type stuff. Also, the big games of the week and everything in between. So if you want to have one of those, simply subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share it with your friends in terms of making sure that we can have a once a week live show for everything Big 12. All right, let's jump into this in terms of what's going on with the Athletic right now in terms of where they think each team is tiered in the Big 12. They gave 4 tiers for the 2023 season. And you know what? Let's just start at tier number 4. It's pretty self-explanatory. You got West Virginia, BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and Iowa State, right? I'm not trying to crap on any of these programs, but this seems pretty cut and dry for this season, right? And I will say this too. I've changed my stance on who I think finishes last in the conference. I've been pretty hard on Neil Brown and the Mountaineers this offseason, and I think it's warranted somewhat. Maybe I've been too hard on them on certain things. But when you look at what's going on with Iowa State right now, it's hard to envision a scenario where that football program does well. And obviously, I like Matt Campbell as a head coach, but with all the off the field stuff going on, let's just call it that for right now, within that program, it's hard to envision them focusing and actually having a worthwhile season. So for me, I think I'm probably going to shift them down, and it's kind of a coin flip now between West Virginia, BYU, Iowa State, all these teams down here at the bottom. And again, it's Cincinnati is in there as well as Houston, 3 of the new Big 12 schools right now. But I want to ask you guys this. And again, I'm not trying to be too hard, but which team will finish last in the Big 12 in 2023? I think it's probably going to be one of those 5 schools. And if we're, a betting type person, which I kind of am, I would probably take one of the 3 schools that is joining the Big 12 conference outside of UCF, who we'll talk about here in just a minute. But let me know down in the comments, predict the future for me. Which team do you have finishing last in the Big 12 in 2023? All right, let's jump into tier 3 right now. Pretty simple: Oklahoma State, UCF, and Kansas. And I think if you watch any of my videos here on the channel, you know one thing about me when it comes to the Jayhawks, who, by the way, those renderings for their new football stadium and just really the area around the football stadium heading into campus right there. If you've ever been to Lawrence, that's how you get to campus, at least one way. They're beautiful, right? Those Kansas renderings. Hopefully it turns out like that. I think Jayhawks fans deserve it, especially on the gridiron, right? I like Kansas this year. I'm higher on Kansas than a lot of people because you look at all the starting production they bring back, and ESPN had a graphic on their power rankings, and Kansas ranks number 1 in the Big 12 in terms of production coming back at 85%, right? If Jalen Daniels stays healthy, Kansas has the chance to make that leap into tier 2. In my opinion, right? I love what Lance Leopold is doing up there in Lawrence. I think he's done a phenomenal job. It all just comes down to, can they keep their dynamic playmaker healthy in Jalen Daniels? That being said, I wholeheartedly agree with them being in tier 3. The team that I think can actually make that jump into tier 2 outside of Kansas between Oklahoma State and UCF is Oklahoma State, because they have a cupcake-ass schedule this year. They only go to Texas once, and they get to play Houston, right? So I think when you look at who could potentially surprise some people when it comes to the win total in terms of, damn, I didn't expect that to happen, I think Oklahoma State, especially with Mike Gundy as the head coach, could really propel themselves into that higher up next tier. All right, tier 2 is by far the most interesting to me. It's 3 Texas schools. You got Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor. Listen, I could legitimately see any of these 3 teams making a jump into tier 1 and playing in Arlington this year. And really what it comes down to is this: Texas Tech, again, it's kind of the Kansas argument. They've got a ton of experience coming back. 18 returning starters from the Texas Bowl return for the Red Raiders. You only start 22. That got 18 back if you're Texas Tech. That's impressive. Now, there is going to be some shifting around. You do lose a guy like Tyree Wilson who will step up. I think that's probably going to be Steve Linton and Miles Cole for the Red Raiders. But then you look at TCU. They lose a lot of production on offense, 8 of 11 starters. But here's the thing. I'm just a Dykes believer when it comes down to it. He is a phenomenal coach. I think he's in a perfect situation at TCU. They went out and had one of the best transfer portal hauls, going down and basically poaching whoever they want, it felt like, from Alabama, JoJo Earl most notably. And not to mention they're probably starting left or right tackle. Not sure exactly where he's going to start. But you go down and get impact guys right away to fill some of these holes for the production that you've lost, right? I assume Chandler Morris is going to be the starting quarterback. Remember, he was the starting quarterback last year, got hurt, and then Max Duggan, well, we know what happened after that. And then at Baylor, right, I just don't think Blake Shapen can be that bad, and I don't think a Dave Aranda defense can be that bad again either, right? I think Dave Aranda is an underrated head coach. I think he gets the job done in terms of elevating the Baylor Bears. And I really think these are the 3 teams that you need to look out for that make that significant jump in terms of the 9 and maybe even 10 wins potentially in the conference. Because looking at the landscape of the Big 12, and we'll talk about Tier 1 here in just a second. Again, Tier 2 that we're talking about right now, Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor. I think when you look at it, right, like it's pretty much wide open when you think about everything, okay? Like Texas is probably the clear-cut best team on paper. We've said that for a long time. They haven't done really anything with it over the past decade. But if it doesn't happen this year, I'm not sure when it does for Texas. And we'll talk about that more in a minute as well. But it's wide open in the sense of I could see Texas Tech winning 10 games. I could also see Texas Tech winning 7. Same goes for TCU and Baylor, right? It is a wide open field. It is going to be a juggernaut in terms of week in and week out. You're going to have to play your best football to get to where you want to go. The parity is amazing in the league this year. And I think that these 3 schools, again, Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor, have a significant chance to make that jump to Tier 1 and have a pretty solid chance in playing for the Big 12 title in Arlington. All right, Tier number 1. You've got Texas, Kansas State, Oklahoma. I mean, let's be real. We all knew this was going to be Tier number 1 when it came down to it. First and foremost, shout out to the K-State Wildcats. Emu, happy to see them in Tier number 1 and finally getting some respect when it comes down to it. If you've watched anything on this channel and know anything about me in terms of really dating back to last year here on the channel, I have been a huge Will Howard fan. I think Will Howard is one of those quarterbacks that is going to become a household name this year across the country, let alone the Big 12. What they've done in Manhattan is phenomenal. And again, we should talk about Texas and Oklahoma as well. I think Brett Venables, that defense, there's no way it's that bad again 2 years in a row, especially with that guy at the helm. They also went out and got guys in the portal that are impact guys, including Reggie Pearson from Texas Tech right down the road. And I think Dylan Gabriel and that offense will still have a better year as well. A little bit more dynamic playmakers this year for Oklahoma on the offensive side. But for me, Kansas State is the talking point, right? Because I think Kansas State is going to win the Big 12 regular season title and play in Arlington. I think Will Howard's that good. Now, a lot of people are going to come at me and say, RC, you got to think about this. They lose Deuce Vaughn. Who's going to replace that? They got a 2-headed monster back there. It's not one person anymore, and including Ward, a transfer from Florida State, who I really, really like, right? But you look at what Kansas State has on their offensive line, including 3 guys that I think are going to get drafted next year, right? Led by BB. They've got a phenomenal offensive line. And like it or not, college football at every level, it doesn't matter if you're at the highest level in the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC, it doesn't matter, all the way down to whatever conference you want to name. You win games in the trenches. And when you have an offensive line that comes back and has over 100 combined starts like Kansas State does, yeah, you're going to be in a good spot. Not to mention, again, I love Will Howard. Now, on the Texas front, they are the most talented team when it comes to on paper. And I think that this is one of those years where if it doesn't happen now, I'm not sure when it's going to happen, because you think about it, Quinn Ewers, solid, but look at all the playmakers they got. They go out and they get a wide receiver from Georgia. Xavier Worthy comes back. You got one of the best tight ends in the country. Your offensive line is led by Banks, who is arguably the best offensive lineman in the Big 12. Not to mention you go out and you add on defense and you got veteran leadership on your defense, which you've needed, right? And also you go out and you get one of the best safeties in America from Arkansas, who transferred down to Austin. Listen, I think when it comes down to it, these are the three best teams going into the season, but I am going to pick Kansas State to win it. I agree with most of these tiers, honestly. I think the Athletic did a pretty solid job when it comes to tiers. You can move a team up or down, but when it comes down to it, I don't think any of those teams like Texas Tech, TCU, or Baylor need to be in tier one. I guess the best argument would be for TCU after what they did last year. Oklahoma State, UCF, and Kansas don't deserve to be in tier two, and I think tier four is pretty self-explanatory when it comes down to it. One more time, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to join one of the most interactive Texas Tech and Big 12 communities here on YouTube. Again, if we get 25 new subscribers from this video alone, and I can check out the analytics, people, we will have a once a week Big 12 live show here on the channel, answering your favorite betting questions, talk about the latest breaking news, the biggest games of the week, who is standing out, and everything in between. So if you want that, tell your friends about the channel. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to stay in the know on everything Big 12 right here on the Back to 12 podcast channel.